If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
You are listening to MINDSHOCK True Crime. This is the Stephen Avery series. Episode 27, Full House. We're gonna go over the comings and goings of countless individuals on the afternoon and night in question. Halloween 2005. Teresa Hallback supposedly last seen at the Avery Salvage Yard. Now, why were there so many individuals that just happened to be around? I mean, you have Scott Taduk, whatever his name is, and of course Avery's sister Barb, their sons Brendan, Brian, Blaine, Bobby, all those individuals. Scott didn't even know their names, but they're coming and going at various times. And we're also going to go deep into Earl Avery's testimony and everything that entails, as well as other individuals on the property, encountering Stephen Avery himself multiple times. I mean, where's Stephen Avery's time? I mean, if he truly is the love child between MacGyver and a Navy SEAL, even then, does he have windows of opportunity to pull this off with the amount of people coming and going around the property? And that's without even considering that this is Halloween night. Trick-or-treaters, partiers, families all over the place. He's really gonna kill someone who's supposed to be on the property, and who he himself goes around telling everybody that there's a photographer coming. And he's got a $36 million lawsuit. So again, of course, the guilters, not much sense in being able to present any kind of logic or evidence that stands up to any kind of logical scrutiny. But those employing critical thinking and powers of deduction seem to conclude that the state's narrative is complete baloney. So this is what we will be going over in this mind-shocking episode. Perhaps the most mind-shocking of them all thus far, which is saying a lot. As always, if you like the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications. Make sure you allow your device to have those notifications come through. If you like this particular podcast, hit the like button, share it across social media platforms. Keep the awareness up, not just for this wrongful conviction, but for all the other wrongful convictions out there. You can check us out on social media, Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case and topic requests. Questions, comments, thoughts, theories, debunkings, rebuttals, insults of any kind, leave them in the comment section. All right, so let's jump right in here. So one of the least talked about individuals regarding the Stephen Avery case, a lot of people focus on Scott Tadaiche and Bobby Dassey, but not as many people seem to focus on one individual known as Earl Avery. Now, actually, right before we jump into that, let's look at this piece of information here. Stephen Avery was talking to the media before the RAV was found. So let's, in these comments, he said he hoped Teresa was okay. He had no idea what happened. Hopefully she'd return or be found. And he also specifically mentions that her parents must be going through hell. And of course, he does have experience with that when he himself was kidnapped by the state and wrongfully imprisoned during the first frame-up, which, again, guilters seem to ignore. I mean, these same individuals framed this guy when there wasn't 36 mil on the line. So what about Earl Avery? Because before the RAV was found, he told Pam and Nicole Stern that he knows what it's like to lose somebody. So he's already talking and thinking about Hallback being dead when this is a missing persons case? I mean, this is shades of Mike Hallback and Ryan Hilligus, who made some very odd comments as if they need time to mourn and all these things. Teresa's missing. Who said she was dead? That's just really bizarre. If you, again, compare it to other cases, missing persons cases, this is just shady all around. then, of course, we mentioned this in the earlier episodes, Earl Avery hid from police when they came to his house. So what did he know that made him so terrified of police? So there was an individual, again, in the CASO investigative report, for those that actually read reports instead of just getting information from a very biased documentary, Making a Murderer, which only highlighted 1% of the state's shadiness and Manitowoc County corruption, while not even bothering to set the record straight on Stephen Avery, whether it was the cat incident or all of this other evidence that seemingly exculpatory that the documentary didn't even bring up. So it's very, very biased, and that's actually one of the main reasons why this MindShock podcast exists, because so much corruption has not been exposed, and it needs a fair and objective look. So in the CASO report, there is one Robert Fabian. Not Fabio, the fashion guy, Fabian. Robert Fabian. And he was on the property himself. Again, just another individual who just happened to be on the property among many. I mean, again, all these people are coming and going, and nobody saw or heard Teresa being murdered. Murdered in the trailer, then murdered again in the garage. Of course, no evidence at either murder site. Stephen Avery, if guilty, obviously, is a multi-personality psychic genius of such epic proportions that he's just the greatest criminal mastermind in the history of crime, able to clean up crime scenes so effectively that he can leave no trace of a crime while maintaining years of dust and grime. It's just amazing. Stephen Avery, just absolutely amazing in his criminal abilities, or at least one of his personalities. So, this Fabian character, him and Earl Avery are riding around in a golf cart all over the property. This golf cart apparently was hit by a cadaver dog. Now, what that means exactly, also unknown. So supposedly they're hunting rabbits with a .22 caliber rifle. Now, just like with all these other individuals coming and going on the property, the statements are ever changing. Again, I mean, it's so hard to keep up with stories that are constantly changing. So we're not sure how the coercion narrative unfolded. Again, with the legend of the bonfire and all of these other things, as Manitowoc and corrupt state officials are framing this narrative to frame Avery and making up all this stuff, and then they have to get everybody to go along with it. So all these interviews are ever changing by all of these people. It's not one shady individual. It's literally just about every single person interviewed. If you look at all of their interviews week to week to week to month, they're always changing. So originally, Earl said that Fabian came by at 2:30. The next statement he made, it was 3:30. Fabian himself says he was there between 4:30 and 4:45. So supposedly, they're hunting at 4:45 at the latest. Now, when they're done, guess where they go? Stephen Avery's trailer. How do they get there? By the golf cart. So if they're by his trailer around 5:15. So out of all these individuals that were on location, so between Fabian, Earl, Stephen, Brendan, Barb, Scott Tadiche, none of them smelled burning plastic except for Fabian. All right, so he either has the greatest sense of smell or there was no burning plastic. So Fabian was the only person who also has superhuman hearing, because no one else overheard any conversations between Chuck and Stephen. However, Fabian did. He said that Stephen either said the photographer had not shown up or something of the like, so possibly Stephen could have been saying photographer had not shown up yet, but Fabian himself reportedly heard photographer had not shown up. Now, we do know that Avery made sure that it was known that Teresa Hallback was there. So, And again, if he's trying to get away with something, would he say she wasn't there? And if she really was there and then left, as witnesses claim, what would Avery say? Would he say that she came and left? Would he pretend that she never came? And if he's telling the truth, then he's got nothing to lie about, and he would just say what he saw, which seems to be the case. Again, unless he's a criminal mastermind genius. All right, so how could Fabian have overheard Avery and Chuck speak? Because, again, we have all these ever-changing timelines by all the witnesses present. I mean, we do not have a consistent narrative here, and for some reason, guilters don't find problems with any of this. Everybody's on the up and up, the investigation's on the up and up, nobody was coerced, nobody changed stories, even though they obviously did so many times, that we can't make heads or tails of anything, and is that exactly the way they wanted it? That's the question there. All right, so Fabian claims he was already home by the time that Avery spoke to Chuck, according to other accounts, yet Fabian overheard Stephen Avery and Chuck Avery. So Fabian claims that he was there from 4:30 to 4:45, and Stephen Avery talked to Chuck that day in the morning and at 5:57 p.m. when he called him. So none of that makes any sense, of course. Supposedly Earl was picking up eyeglasses at 5:30 that day also. And Fabian's wife did not remember Fabian being there on Halloween. She said he was there on a different day, but again, I don't know. Would Fabian know where he was more than his wife? I don't know. It's just, in this case, it just seems like nothing can ever be nailed down no matter what. So, as far as Earl being the killer of Teresa Hallback, if that's true, supposedly he had said that Stephen Avery had a relationship with his daughter, and the daughter, and someone went to the police about it, but the daughter wouldn't cooperate. So was it not true, and police were just trying to implicate Avery on trumped up charges the way they always do, whether it was throwing the cat in the fire, which he didn't do. Obviously, that was Yanda admitted in a written police statement. The guilters still maintain it was Avery that picked up the cat and threw it. No evidence of that, of course, but in the police report, it was rewritten, and they threw, and Stephen was the only one punished, because that's how they roll in Manitowoc. And then, of course, the 85 frame-up. So were they just looking to trump up more false charges and frame Avery, and Earl, who knows what Earl really believed, too, because Earl could have believed that there was some kind of relationship with Stephen Avery and his daughter when there wasn't, and all these other people were lying about it to frame Avery. I mean, I don't know. Or Avery really is not a good character and did these other crimes. Obviously, that doesn't mean he's guilty of killing Teresa Hallback, and if somebody else killed her, shouldn't that person be held responsible? The guilters seem to just absolutely have no logic and reason. Let's say Avery is the worst scumbag ever. Why does that mean a murderer needs to get away with murder because Avery's a scumbag? Like, how does that make any sense? It doesn't make any sense. It's so bizarre. All right. And all these corrupt cops off the hook, they're all responsible for the real murderer getting away. So regardless of whether Avery's the worst person ever, if he didn't kill Teresa Hallback, if Teresa Hallback is dead, it's strange how the guilters just don't care about truth or justice, and they're okay with some murderer running around there killing even more people because they just hate Avery that much. They're okay with the real murder of Hallback, if she was murdered, killing countless other people. It's so weird. It's so weird, but guilters, go figure. All right, so Earl Avery also had, if he believed this relationship was true, he's got motive. He's also got opportunity because Earl Avery had said that he knows every inch of the yard, and nobody would find it suspicious of him being out and about, which he was. And so Fabian, who's Earl Avery's lifelong friend, did they hatch a plot to kill Hallback or kidnap Hallback, and I don't know, or some kind of plot to get back at Stephen Avery. So Yeah, I mean, it's quite curious, and not to fall for black and white fallacies. What if they did have this plan, but they couldn't execute it because Hallback already left? So would they still go along with trying to frame Avery, even if they knew he was innocent? And that's just another variable to add to the pile here, because it's really hard to figure out. So the other thing we have to address, of course, is Fabian's testimony. So the prosecution, of course, doesn't even ask him about Avery's demeanor, changing clothes, whatever, these things that Fabian had said. So apparently Fabian encountered Stephen Avery 3 times that day. 3 times! Not once, not twice, but thrice! And this is not addressed at trial. Why not? Is Ken Kratz that terrified of people making Freudian slips, as he did with, of course, Pam Sturm and all these things where he's cutting people off, he's silencing people? He really does not want certain aspects addressed because the narrative would fall apart, or he's worried that people are going to slip up or forget, or just they're too nervous to play along. Really, really bizarre. And then, of course, if Fabian's account runs contrary to all these other known facts, the cross-examination could hypothetically open him up to being torn apart and the narrative torn apart, which is why they didn't really go into his full account of being on the property. But that's kind of strange. Again, let's contrast this with other cases. In what other cases do they not even go over the guy that was on the property, encountered Stephen Avery 3 times, was coming and going that afternoon, and they just gloss over it? I mean, his testimony could include smoking guns, and they just completely just don't really address most of it. It's really bizarre. Really, really bizarre stuff. So apparently they also took 2 trees down, and that's how many trees were covering the SUV. So if the golf cart itself had something on it that the dogs hit, that's strange. Now, of course, the license plates that were chucked into a station wagon, could that have been done from a golf cart that was just riding around the property? Again, we have these guys. They were riding around the property. They were all over the place. They were at Stephen Avery's trailer. They were hunting. They were chopping down trees. Coincidentally, the RAV4 was covered by trees. So, I don't know. It's just really, really bizarre that all these things are going on at Halloween. It's really bizarre. Let's say Avery really did want to kill somebody. Would he do it Halloween? When there's all these people coming and going? I don't know. It's weird. Because Stephen Avery seems to be having a lot of conversations with a lot of different people when he's supposed to be busy raping and murdering, cremating an individual with the amount of heat that's required, and driving all over the place, sprinkling remains at the Manitowoc gravel pit, sprinkling them all over Redaunt's property, trying to frame his sister by putting the remains in her burn barrels as well. He's doing all these things while going around talking to a million different people on his property. I mean, how many conversations did he have with how many different people that afternoon in a completely calm fashion while making sure they all knew that Teresa Hallback was there? This is rough. This is rough. These episodes are always so rough to do because, as I mentioned many times, this is like a common sense test for adults. Like, this case is going to be taught in law school for wrongful conviction, as a textbook wrongful conviction and botched investigation. And in hindsight, it's going to appear so obvious. But for whatever reason, guilters, I don't know, just indoctrinated into the cult of authority worship that hopelessly that they just can't understand that there's corrupt humans out there, or incompetent humans, not even necessarily corrupt, but incompetent. And obviously they don't know what beyond a reasonable doubt means. Okay, so Robert Fabian also stated, this from the report, Robert indicates if Teresa Hallback's vehicle had been in that location on Monday night, Earl would have told him something because Earl knows every car that's in the yard. So how many thousands of cars are in the yard? So several thousand cars. And Robert Fabian is saying that Earl Avery would not just know every car, but I guess he would have to check every single possible spot a car could be. Oh, man. Okay. And not only that, but... not only that, but hold on. Robert Fabian... So not only... Let's say Earl Avery did notice a suspicious car. The top priority on his list, on his to-do list that day, would have been to tell Robert Fabian, who doesn't even work on the property and has nothing to do with any of those cars. Earl Avery, as soon as Earl Avery finds an out-of-place car, he's going to tell Robert Fabian first. Not only tell him, but tell him first. Oh man, this is Comedy Central. I don't know what to make of this queso report. I don't know what to make of all these individual statements. I mean, I don't know what to make of all these timelines. Nothing holds up to any kind of logic or reason. It's really, really bizarre. So both Fabian and Earl said that they drove past the area where the RAV4 was found, and apparently there was no other vehicle there that didn't belong. Okay, so yeah, again, the Averys kept. I mentioned this before. The Averys kept the vehicles in the yard based on the age of the vehicles. So the RAV4 would not have been put in that spot unless it was someone who didn't know how the vehicles were arranged. So that does not quite point to any Avery planting the RAV4 there, because that's where it'd be found, unless they wanted it to be found at that particular time, because clearly it wasn't there. We have the helicopter flyover, all that, obviously it wasn't there. So it was taken elsewhere and then either brought back. So if it was Earl Avery or Fabian, then they would have planted the RAV4 there on purpose so it would stick out, because it didn't belong in that yard based on age. Or it was someone who didn't know that the vehicles were all arranged on the property based on age, and there are thousands of vehicles. So someone like Ryan Hilligus, Mike Hallback, a police officer, they might not know exactly how the cars are arranged. All right, doesn't tell us that much. So I don't know. It's really bizarre. Some people point to Robert Fabian's statement as suspicious, because if you're asking about cars sticking out, would he say something like, oh yeah, he would have told him? Why would he have told him? It's really bizarre. Something doesn't add up there. The other thing is Robert Fabian, maybe he's got just the most perfect memory ever, because he also noted that Stephen Avery had on light and summery attire when he had changed, even though it was cold. I don't know what any of that means. But, so, yeah, we do seem to have a dearth of credible witnesses, because everybody's stories are constantly changing and their statements don't really make any sense, and everybody seems to be loaded with some kind of an agenda, or just had been intimidated and coerced and were saying things that don't make sense for whatever reasons. So, I haven't really talked about Bobby Dassey too much, but let's see who else was around. So, page 84 of the queso report. According to Lank, Jody Stachowski indicated that on Friday, contact was made between Jody and Stephen, and at that time, Stephen indicated that Bobby had seen Teresa after Stephen had. I asked Mr. Dassey why Stephen Avery would say that Bobby was the last one to see the photographer. Bobby responded, "Did he say that?" I then asked Bobby if it was true, and his response was no. I asked Bobby why Stephen would say something like this, and Bobby's response was, "He'd stab ya in the back." Bobby indicated that Stephen had done this to him before over, quote, little stuff, end quote. So you know what's weird is that true? Or did Stephen Avery actually protect the Dassey boys? And let's get into that. So I'm not going to go too deep into Bobby Dassey here because I'm going to do a dedicated episode on Bobby and Scotty. But as far as Stephen Avery selling them out, it looks like he did the opposite. Because Stephen Avery, apparently, he was angry on November 3rd because Barb's boys were selling near his house. So if they were involved in drugs or drug dealing, is that why that property was under surveillance by Manitowoc and it wasn't specifically officers looking to trap Stephen Avery or frame him for something? They were actually investigating the Dassey boys for drug dealing. Is that a possibility? But Stephen Avery actually doesn't say anything. He protects them. He says he doesn't want to talk about it on the phone because he knows the phone conversations are being recorded. So, and despite all this, he still hasn't come out and thrown them under the bus, which is kind of telling. The people who believe Stephen Avery doesn't have any character, it seems like he's acting on the other side of that. It seems like despite everything said and done, he was still unwilling to throw his nephews under the bus. So other theories, and here's a huge mind shock. I mean, I'll drop it right here. One of the biggest mind shocks in the Stephen Avery case. So the particular agent, Kathy W., who was really interested in the Avery Salvage Yard, if she was at the narcotics department of the Department of Justice, was she using Auto Trader as a front to surveil the Janda home and not Stephen Avery? Is that why she was so interested in that property? What were the lights at night? There were sightings of lights and all these things, police surveillance. Is it possible that they weren't going after Stephen Avery in this particular instance and other investigations got crossed? Is that why Scott Tedice is so shady? Did he know about it? Did he participate? Did he not participate, but he wasn't going to throw his girlfriend's sons under the bus? So is it easier just to turn this whole thing around on Avery? And is this the dirt that law enforcement had on the Dasseys and Janda, and they just used that as leverage to concoct this story and frame-up job on Stephen Avery? I will let that one settle into your brains for a moment. All right, so let's go back. All right, let's go back to the case report and all these write-ups. So Scott Tedice put himself at the Barb Janda trailer both at 5:15 and at 7:30 p.m. on October 31st. Barb Janda confirms that. Tedice claimed to see a fire behind Stephen Avery's trailer and thought that Avery and one of the Dassey boys was there. Lisa Novacek reports that Tedice did not go to work that day. Another coincidence. A few days later, at about the time of Avery's arrest, Tedice left work when he got a phone call from a hysterical young teenage kid. He was a nervous wreck. Later, he told his foreman that there was some blood on the boy's clothes and that it had gotten mixed up in the Tedice's laundry. In Tedice's laundry. Queso report, page 687. According to Tedice's foreman, Tedice is a chronic liar and capable of the murder of Miss Hallback or of knowing something more about it. Queso report, pages 719 to 720. Later, Tedice tried to sell a .22 rifle belonging to one of Barb Janda's kids, the Dassey brothers. Queso report, page 725. There is a .22 caliber bullet that the Wisconsin Crime Laboratory has identified as bearing Teresa Hallback's DNA. There is also a hole in a skull bone fragment consistent with a .22 caliber bullet. And of course, that so-called evidence is obviously under dispute. But just interesting details around this Scott Tedice character and the Dasseys. So one more thing regarding this. This is Investigator John Dietering's report, Saturday, November 5th, 2005, 14:57 hours. Sometime after arriving back from the Earl Avery residence, Dietering, was contacted by Lieutenant James Lank, Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department. Lank indicated that a member of the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department had contact with Stephen Avery's fiancée, identified as Jody Stakowski. Jody told the individual from law enforcement she spoke with that in telephone conversations she had with Stephen Avery, Stephen told her that Bobby Dassey had had contact with Teresa Hallback after Stephen did. It should be noted that Jody Stakowski is currently housed in the Manitowoc County Jail, and Barb Janda is Stephen Avery's sister, and that Bobby Dassey is Barb Janda's son. Lank went on to indicate that Jody had visited with Steve at the jail on Tuesday, and at that time, according to Stakowski, Stephen told Jody that Teresa Hallback had come to photograph the car, and that was all. So yet another individual, Stephen is going around telling people that Hallback was on his property. Oh, man. Okay, according to Lank, Jody Stakowski indicated that on Friday, contact was made between Jody and Stephen, and at this time, Stephen indicated that Bobby had seen Teresa after Stephen had. So very, very interesting what Stephen is confiding with other people, but not telling law enforcement and throwing people under the bus. So here's the final mind shock of the evening, if you guys didn't get enough already. So, we are going to TMZ, the highly credited website that is TMZ.com. Chuck Avery, Stephen is a liar. I didn't murder anyone. This was posted January 6th, 2016. Stephen Avery's brother, Chuck, says it's a scurrilous lie that he murdered Teresa Hallback. Chuck tells TMZ he was pissed off when Stephen filed legal documents in 2009 making the accusation. As we reported, Stephen pointed the guilty finger at his brothers, claiming one of them may well have brutally taken Teresa's life. Stephen cited their history of sexually assaulting women and claimed Chuck had been stalking women who visited the junkyard within a month of the murder. So let's look at this article. Stephen Avery, my brothers, may have killed Teresa Hallback. January 6, 2016. Stephen Avery claims his own two brothers may have killed Teresa Hallback, especially one who he says has a history of harassing women at the exact location where Teresa was last seen. Avery filed legal documents obtained by TMZ in which he claims brothers Earl and Charles may have done the deed for which he's serving a life sentence. He says both have a history of sexually assaulting women. Earl once pled no contest to sexually assaulting his two daughters. You know what's weird, though? If these people are these types of people, how jealous are they going to be of Stephen Avery walking around with his chin up, being exonerated and having a $36 million lawsuit on the horizon? I don't know. I don't know any of these people. But it's an interesting dynamic that you don't exactly see in other cases. According to the documents, which Stephen filed in 2009 after his conviction, brother Charles's criminal conduct and actions are even more problematic. He was charged with sexually assaulting his wife by holding her down and trying to strangle her with a phone cord before having intercourse with her. The docs say Charles also had a history of aggression towards women who visited the family's junkyard. One woman who was there to retrieve her car that had been towed complained to cops she was afraid of Charles because he was aggressively pursuing her, sending flowers and money to her home, calling her incessantly, and showing up at her doorstep. According to documents, there was another incident in which a woman who bought a car part from the junkyard was harassed by Charles, who asked her on dates and showed up at her house. Another woman claimed Charles had repeatedly driven by her house and would tell her on the phone he had seen her in her bathing suit as he drove by. He would tell her on the phone, so he'd call her up and be like, "Oh yeah, I saw you in your bathing suit." Wow, if these accounts are true, this is very, very weird and bizarre stuff, and of course, none of this was allowed to be brought up at trial because, of course, Stephen Avery's presumption of innocence was violated very obviously. And this is interesting. According to the documents, all of these women were allegedly harassed by Charles within a month of the time Teresa Hallback went missing. Stephen also says his two brothers had motive to frame him because they were fighting over the family business and were jealous he was on the verge of a multi-million-dollar settlement for being wrongfully convicted of sexual assault. So that's interesting. What in the history of the world, how much has family jealousy been the motivating factor in frame-up jobs or crimes in general? I mean, this is basic human psychology. So in this case, you have his own brothers. I mean, this is crazy. You have his own brothers. You have Bobby Dassey, Scott Tedice next door. You have cops who framed him before. I mean, you have this bizarre ex-boyfriend of Teresa Hallback. I mean, you have all of these bizarre individuals with motives and history of violence against women who were not allowed to have been brought up in trial. It's just very, very bizarre. This is MindShock True Crime. Of course, the truth is not afraid of investigation. Was this an actual legitimate investigation and trial? So, continuing the original article, Chuck says the accusations on his ex-wife are also BS, although he does not explain why he pled no contest to the assault. And Chuck says it's ridiculous for Stephen to think he wanted to frame him because they were both vying to own the junkyard. Chuck also says he's owned the family business since 1990. He says, if anything, he was planning on making Stephen a partner in the family biz since Stephen was on the verge of winning a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against the county for his wrongful conviction. But why would he need to be a partner if... Wait, I don't know. Despite Stephen's attempt to throw him and Earl under the bus, Chuck says the families moved past it. So did they just view that as a family spat? It's all quite bizarre, but what seems just the strangeness of just the amount of individuals coming and going on the property that day, it's just bizarre. And how does this Fabian character play into it? Because his account just seems strange. Then you have Redant nearby, and of course this is Halloween. It seems like none of these accounts really add up, and we just don't have an accurate picture of what really happened, but it does seem that Teresa Hallback really did leave the Avery Salvage Yard, and then what happened afterwards is unknown. And if you haven't checked out the previous MindShock episodes in this series, check them out, because we go pretty deep. We have the cell phone records, the cell tower information, where Hallback was spotted after leaving Avery Salvage Yard. But just the sheer amount of individuals on the property, it was a full house. It was a packed property, people coming and going. Steve and Avery constantly on the phone, having all these nonchalant conversations. It's just really, really bizarre. If he committed this crime and did the burning and the cleanup job, it's such a preposterous claim to ask people to just believe this narrative without any actual evidence that stands up to logical scrutiny. It's really, really bizarre. It's bizarre. If you guys have any input, feel free to leave it in the comment section. Any questions, theories, rebuttals, debunkings, leave them in the comment section. If you like the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications. Share the podcast. You can also check us out on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case and topic and co-podcaster requests. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.